Hello, everybody. My name is Giovanni Quevedo. Joined with me today is Anthony Nasser, Kevin Lee, and Andy Zhu, and we are the SubRemind team. Today, we have an application called SubReminder, and the whole point of this application is to give users a view of all the subscriptions at a glance. We wanted to make an application that can track a user's expenses without needing the user to release all of their personal financial banking information to us, as well as, their social and all that good stuff. We believe that everyone should have access to a software that allows them to manage their finances and their money without needing to know everything about them. So right here, if you want to take a look, I have a wireframe set up to show how this application would have looked. Unfortunately, due to the scaling and the scoping, we were only able to work on the back end, and the front end never really came out the way we wanted it to. So we unfortunately don't have a front end to show you, but in a little bit, I will have our two back end developers talk a little bit more about how they worked on that end of things. So this wireframe kind of shows a little bit about how when there's a login page and a sign up page so that we can use user authentication in order to get a user's data. And when the user authenticates with us, we have a user page to show them their current active subscriptions, as well as a little bit of analytical view just to show how their subscriptions track and chart over time. This gives the user a nice view of their financial spending on what subscriptions they have, and it allows them to cancel their subscriptions or even set up text and SMS reminders when the subscriptions are due. So that way they get a text notification to let them know that their subscription is coming up soon. So this application is heavily dependent on user authentication. We have a very, very strong user authentication system built into the backend. The scale and scope of our project was way too big to complete within the time of the hackathon, and we unfortunately scaled up very large so that we were unable to get a fully functioning front end the way we wanted it to. But our back end works perfectly fine, and we have plenty of routes that we're able to access, and we basically built a back end API that we can rely on for all this data. I'll pass it over to Anthony Nasser to talk a little bit more about that.
So as Gio went over, although we didn't get to actually make the front end portion of this, all the logic for that back end code, that wireframe that you see, is implemented, and we could currently test within Postman. So me and Andy Zhu are going to go over all the backend code that we went, or like do a brief overview of all the backend code that we use to in order to accomplish this, and then we're going to actually test everything through endpoints. So Andy. Andy.
So on this file, this is how we're connecting to our Mongo database. The original plan for our application was to implement the MERN stack, which would be Mongo, Express, React, and Node. And as you see on this file, it's just a simple asynchronous database connection file where we create a Mongo URI string. And there we save that in a process.env file, which is our .env for our secrets, keys, and just variables we don't want to share with the public. And then moving on from there, we actually made custom middleware that involves JSON Web Token. And we actually have a method before this called where we sign the JWT.
That's going to be generate.
Yeah,
token.
this is called generate token. And basically, we just return a signed JWT and we pass in the secret we created on our dev.env file. And this validates the JSON Web Token. And then upon login or upon registration, we return this token to the user. And this is how the user is able to access our API and make those protected, hit those protected routes and make authenticated requests. Now, moving back to the user auth middleware. As you can see here, we pass in an auth header, which is where we create this in the request object. And from then on, we check whether each user has an authorization header. And then we verify this JSON Web Token, and we pass them back a decoded token. Now we save this decoded token ID as a rec.user ID, so we can use this on other parts of our application without having to make multiple calls and pass multiple JSON Web Tokens back to the user.
Cool. And these are all the models that we use in order to model reminders, subscriptions, and the user himself or herself. And the way it works is that all reminders have a subscription attached to them, and all reminders are attached to a user as well. A user has an array of reminder objects. And these are the routes that we use to authenticate a user. So I don't know if you want to kind of go over this. Andy? No. Okay. Well, this is the login route, and
Oh, sorry, I'm back. My
yeah,
bad.
cool.
So this is our login route, and this is just a simple post request where we check if the user is passing on all the correct data like email and password. We're going to compare the password to the confirmed password um, in the database to just make sure that all the data is correct. If that is so, we're going to pass the user through. We're going to pass them a success message. And also we're going to pass them back some user data that they'll be able to use on the front end. Now, the reason we're only passing back these specific properties, first name, last name, user ID, and the token, is because this is the only data that's going to be used frequently throughout the app. And on the front end that we unfortunately didn't get to finish, we actually implemented a modularized version of Redux. And because we have to show the first name and last name so much across the front end, that those are the properties we wanted to return back to the user. And on top of that, we pass the JSON Web Token back to the user on login, so they can use this token, like we said earlier, to hit the protector routes and make authenticated requests for the API.
Cool. And I won't go too into subscription and reminder routes just for the lack of time, but we do have create, read, update, and destroy routes for all subscriptions and all reminders. And whenever a subscription is created, it automatically generates a reminder, as I mentioned earlier. And if when we update a reminder, we are going to actually schedule that SMS message through this script called SMS message.js. And this is a function that Geo wrote. So if you want to explain that.
Yeah, so just to give a quick overview, this code is it uses a lot of interesting logic that we were using for testing because I did run into a couple problems when we first set it up, but it basically uses the MessageBird API to schedule a message into the future for the user's next appointment or payment reminder. The user can set up if they want a reminder set up, and using their phone number, it will send a message to their phone. And we can actually get an example of that in a couple of minutes, but it'll send an SMS message to their phone about what they owe, how much they owe, and what they're paying for, and when it's going to be due. So that way they can just have another reminder letting them know when their payments are due.
All right, so now I'm going to actually run the server and we could test all the endpoints that we have. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna have to do is register a new user. So this is in Postman, so we are making requests to our API without actually doing it through a form. This is a JSON object, and we're going to pass in a first name, last name, username, email, phone number, password, and confirm password. But ideally, this would be done on a form in the front end. So if we send this, we get true user successfully registered, John Smith, user ID, and token. And as Andy mentioned before, we specifically chose this data because this is the only thing that we're going to be needing to use on the front end. And before I actually log into this user, I would like to show why we did all this user authentication. So say we want to get all the specific subscriptions. It's not going to let us because we're not authorized. But if we log in that user with example at example.com, and yeah, we get John Smith with that user ID and that token. And we're actually going to need this token in order to authorize ourselves and check all our subscriptions. Now, before I get all subscriptions, we don't have any subscriptions because we dropped the database right before this. So I'm going to create a new subscription. But again, we wouldn't be able to do this unless we have this token. So I'm going to copy and paste that, and there we go. We're going to call this Netflix Premium. Let's do Premium, and then let's do $12.99, so we know we're not using messages. And there we go, successfully initialized a reminder. And yes, we created a new subscription, but upon the creation of a new subscription, we also initialize a reminder. And this doesn't send the reminder message quite yet, but we'll get to that in a second. And you can see as we go on, all the data that we've been doing is actually stored in MongoDB, hosted with Google Cloud. And here you go. There you go, Netflix Premium. And cool. So now we're going to update the reminder, and this is actually going to send a message to Kevin. Put update reminder, and this is a pull request because it's an update, and let's send it to 11:50. 11:50. That's next minute, so he should get a message. Oh, my bad, not authenticated. There we go.
I think you also need to set the reminder in the URI, the reminder token.
Oh, right. Get all.
Ideally, this would all have been done in the front end, but since we weren't able to set it up, we have to kind of use Postman and manually do it ourselves. But as you can see, the endpoints are working perfectly fine. So he's grabbing the reminder's actual ID right now so that we can access it. I think you might need to access it from Postman. Oh, there
I
you go.
just need to grab. I just need to copy and paste this.
There you go.
Cool. And then we need to update that reminder and give it that. And then at 11:50, yeah, this should still work. And so we're setting the next renewal to this would usually be like 30 days in the past, but since we were doing this for demoing purposes, he should receive a message now.
Yeah, so I got the message. It reads, "Hello, John Smith. This is your sub reminder to pay $12.99 for Netflix Premium on April 18th, 2021, which maybe you can see. Maybe. All right.
And also, this is a confirmation message that we send whenever this happens successfully. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for our API demo. We could test all the other routes, but pretty much we could delete those reminders. We could update those reminders. We could delete the subscriptions. We could update the subscriptions. We could get all the subscriptions and we could get all the reminders as well. But yeah, I think that's about it.
All right, we'll pass it over to Andy to give a quick overview about the login authentication, and then we're going to have to wrap it up maybe in like 3 minutes because we have to submit soon.
Hey, and could you go to the front end?
Front end, here you go.
And then can you go to our routing components?
Yes, sir. Routing.
Sure, if we could first talk about Redux, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so just go to the store.
We're gonna have to
first.
cut this code. This is like 20 minutes of this video.
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually implemented a modularized version of Redux, which allowed us just to implement Redux in only 4 files. And here's our store.js file where we initialize the store. And we actually wanted to create persistent state in Redux. So upon refreshing, it doesn't log out the user or nullify all their properties. As you can see here, we create the persistent reducer. And then if you can move on to the actions and sections actions file. So this is just our basic actions for the user, which is just getting the current user and then locking them out. And then in session actions, these are more of our action methods. As you can see, we just pass in a user, and then as type, we receive that same user back. And then for logout, we just log out that current user. And as you can see, we get back a user that is undefined. So this means that they're logged out. Their first name, last name, user ID, token are now all nullified and unvalidated. And then if you can move to the root reducer and session reducer.
Session reducer, there we go.
This is our session reducer. As you can see, our default is that we have all these properties null, and only upon logging in do we give the user state, which allows them to access more parts of our app. And then if you can move to the authenticated requests. So this is our authenticated request that we actually made custom. As you can see, this actually extends our API request. So here, as you can see, we're just passing in a get, or creating a get, post, put, and delete method for each one. So if we wanted to get the user from a database, we would hit this route. If we wanted to do a post, we'd do the same. But this is only for people that have a JSON web token, so they could make this authenticated request. For unlocked in users, we can check out the request.js file. As you can see, the request.js, this file is a lot more hefty because this actually has to create the URL string that we're going to hit. And for right now, that is just localhost. As you can see, we're creating a new promise for each single type of request. And this promise won't get resolved unless the route is hit or there's an error for whatever reason without the right data being passed in, or API is lagging, or for whatever reason. Now, if you want to move to the protected route file, so this is our protected route file. This is basically just checking if we're passing an is logged in prop to our user. And then this is done by using, as we said, the user ID and the JSON web token that we talked about in the backend. If they are logged in, then we're going to want to just let them continue on. But if not, we're going to redirect them to the login page and force them to log in before we give them access to the protected parts of our app. And then we actually have an inverse protected route file as well. Now this is for users that aren't logged in. So this will be just for the register and login route. As you see, we again check if they're logged in. If not, Or if they are, then we're going to redirect them to the home page, meaning that they've already been logged in, they've already been given a validated JSON web token, so that's fine. And if they aren't, we're just going to let them continue onto the unprotected route they were trying to hit. And then we actually did a different form of routing that's normally done on a React app. Instead of handling everything in app.js, we actually created a custom routes file. As you can see here, we have a navbar, which is the top level component in our app. And then we have a switch statement saying that these are the different routes that you could hit on the front end. And you can see that 3 of them, or 4 of them actually are just route components, meaning that they don't need any special authentication or validation to hit. And then we have 2 inverse protected routes, which is for login and register, which would allow them to get their JSON web token, which would allow them to hit this protected route home, which is the only route we have right now that requires a JSON web token and a valid user to be able to hit.
Cool.
Okay,
So
I
yeah, so
think
that basically
that's
does it for our
yeah.
routing for our app. Yeah, everything was made custom and it's all pretty streamlined. And I wish we could have finished more of it to show you guys a fully fledged application.
Definitely, yes. We are very proud of the streamlined application programming interface that we were able to build here. We definitely had a lot to do with the Mongo database and the Google Cloud in the process of storing our data, as well as fetching the data we needed to do all the user auth on the back end. So definitely really happy about this. We just only wish we could have gotten that front end out to you guys, unfortunately, but we wanted to, instead of just, getting something whatever out, we wanted to make sure this was as polished and fine-tuned as we could. So this is what we have now, and for the rest of the SubRemind team, we plan on completely finishing up the front end, getting a fully functioning front end working, since all the back end is good and all the basically hard parts are all figured out for us. And once we get that front end working, we want to get hosting on Heroku, and you should be able to see this app up soon. Thank you very much for all you guys' time. I've been Giovanni Quevedo, and
I've been Anthony, and he's been Kevin, and he's been Andy.
thank you guys so much.
Let's go.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you.